The year was 1398. The ancient city of Delhi stood before one of the most devastating sieges in history, and at the forefront of the destruction was Timur, also known as Timur. His campaigns were not merely about territorial expansion, they were about breaking the spirit of those who dared to resist. This time, Delhi was to become the latest casualty of his unrelenting ambition. His very name sent shivers down the spines of entire civilizations. The city had a tradition of using heavily armored war elephants in battle, a force that had often proven indomitable on the field. But Timur had a plan to neutralize this threat. He didn't engage the elephants directly with swords or spears. Instead, he used camels, creatures Timur. The world had already been terrified by the sheer scale of his conquests. Therefore, he issued an order that would chill the very hearts of those who heard it. It was a calculated and systematic act designed not just to kill, but to send a message that would reverberate across the world. The executions began immediately. It was not enough for Timur to conquer. He wanted to erase any will to resist, to create an example so severe that the soldiers worked relentlessly, not distinguishing between men, women, the elderly, and children. It was a statement, a declaration that anyone who dared oppose Timur would face the same horrifying fate. There were no exceptions, no mercy. The sounds of chains, cries, and the thud of bodies piling up in heaps filled the air as the work from Central Asia to Persia, Afghanistan, and northern India. The Sultanate of Delhi, led by Sultan Esiruddin Mahmud Shah Tughlaq, had gathered an army that was not a conqueror in the traditional sense. He was a terror architect, using violence as a form of psychological warfare. But what shocked the world wasn't just the sheer scale of the killings. It was what happened after. These pyramids were strategically placed around the city to serve as a warning to anyone who dared defy him. Timur had the bodies of the dead used to create monumental structures. 28 pyramids of human according to witnesses. The heads were meticulously arranged, stacked with careful precision. He understood the power of psychological warfare, and his campaigns were as much about instilling terror as they were about physical conquest. His conquests were not about expanding territory alone. They were about creating an empire built on the backs of the broken and the terrified. He used fear as a weapon, and the fear he created they were not merely a symbol of the promise of mercy had been a ruse, a cruel deception. Cities that had considered resisting now reconsidered their positions, understanding that Timur's word meant nothing, only fear and annihilation. His reign was defined by these moments of the cities that fell to him did not simply surrender. They were broken, body and soul. Timur kept his word technically, but violated its spirit in the most terrifying way possible. His legacy is one of fear, a legacy that has been passed down through history, not as a tale of a great conqueror. His reign of terror, while vast, was short-lived, and his empire crumbled soon after his death. But his name continues to evoke fear to this, but as a cautionary tale about the price of absolute power and the depths of human cruelty. Timur's forces were vast, and his strategy was as brutal as it was effective. What happens when a ruler's sole focus is on domination through terror, and when the message of fear becomes more important? His campaigns were not just about destruction. They were about domination, about reminding the world that power could be wielded with unrelenting cruelty. Timur's actions were a grotesque reminder that even these structures were meant to be seen, to etch the consequences of rebellion into the collective memory of the people. The cities he conquered, the lives he destroyed, and the terror he spread left an indelible mark on the history of the world. His name became synonymous with cruelty, and his legacy serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of unchecked authority. They weren't just monuments. They were a chilling reminder that Timur's vengeance knew no bounds. Another infamous event during his reign took place in 1387, in the city of Isfahan, Persia. Timur's story is a tragic reminder of the dangers of absolute power, and it leaves us questioning the very nature of conquest and rule. In the end, his empire fell, but the horror of his actions continues to echo through the pages of history. Isfahan was a city of great cultural wealth and power, and initially, the citizens had surrendered to Timur instead of killing the soldiers. He ordered that they be buried alive. The soldiers were thrown into large pits, and the pits were filled in. Timur's message was clear. Resistance meant obliteration. The sheer scale of the massacre was designed to obliterate any thoughts of rebellion. The city had been a part of the Anatolian region, under the control of the Emirate. When the city's defenders surrendered to Timur, while large, was hastily assembled and ill-prepared for what was coming. This act of defiance became the pretext for one of the most brutal retributions in history. Contemporary historians, including Sharafuddin Ali Yazdi, report Timur had captured over 100,000 prisoners, mostly civilians, many of them Hindus. The victor went the spoils, but to Timur, these prisoners represented unfamiliar to the elephants, and loaded them with burning straw. Once these camels were set alight, they were sent charging towards the elephants, causing a panic among the massive beasts. The chaos ensued as the elephants stampeded, trampling their own ranks. The Delhi army was broken before the first sword was even drawn. With the defense of the city in ruins, Timur's forces swiftly entered the city, looting and pillaging. But the true horror began once the battle was over. It would reverberate across the region for generations. The Sultan and his army were no longer the target. Far more significant threat. He feared that, left alive, they might rise against him during his occupation. Timur ordered the execution of all 100,000 prisoners in a single day. This wasn't a simple massacre. After the city fell, continued for hours. There was no escape, no reprieve. The bloodshed did not end with the fall of the city. This act of barbarity wasn't just about numbers. It was about instilling fear, about showing the world that Timur was unstoppable. The terror that followed the executions was intended to ripple through the subcontinent, ensuring that no one would challenge his rule again. Yet, the horrors of Timur's campaigns didn't end with the massacres, without resistance. But this submission was short. A rebellion broke out in the city, and some of Timur's soldiers were killed. Timur's response was swift, precise, and utterly ruthless. He ordered the massacre of the entire city. Somewhere between 70,000 and 200,000 people were executed. Skulls, each one a terrifying monument to the destruction he had wrought. The skulls were not placed haphazardly. Death. They were a deliberate, public reminder of what happened to those who crossed Timur. Timur's actions went beyond just battles and sieges. Fade when the fighting ended. It lingered, festering in the minds of the people long after the dust had settled. One of the most chilling examples of Timur's ruthlessness came in 1400. During the siege of they were promised that their lives would be spared. But Timur had a different interpretation of mercy. Still alive, this gruesome act of betrayal sent shockwaves through the region. Horrific psychological manipulation, where the terror of his actions was more important than the actions themselves. But the horror of Timur's legacy doesn't end there. The most advanced civilizations could be brought to their knees by the sheer force of terror. In the end, Timur's empire did not last. Today, as we look back on the horrors of Timur's reign, we must ask ourselves, when power is stripped of mercy, what remains of humanity? Then the lives of those who were destroyed in the process.